If you are an employee, one of the things I guess you take for granted is the fact that you go to work, you do your work, you paid your wages or salaries, and everything sort of comes together as it should. But there are a whole bunch of processes that employers have to go through. In simple terms, they're called compliance. Sometimes I've got to tell you, some of the compliance, some of the issues that people, and if you really want to talk to people who feel this, have a chat to people in small business. They'll tell you that they spend just about as much time on compliance as they do actually running their business. In fact, one small business friend joked to me at the golf club one day that he wasn't quite sure whether he had enough time to earn any money in his business because he was so busy trying to comply with all the different rules and regulations. Now, look, before we go any further, none of this changes the fact that there are some dodgy operators out there, and there are people who, given half a chance, will absolutely roger you blind. There's no question about that. But it's probably fair to say that most don't intend to rip off their employees, and I'll tell you why. They don't need the aggro. I mean, even if you got to argue, even if you look at your boss and you think he or she's not that nice a person, one of the principal motivations for not ripping you off is the problem it causes them. It's just not worth it. But we do have what one might describe as rather complex compliance issues. And when we talk about that, let's say, for example, just simply complying with the terms and conditions of your employment in whatever industry you're in, if you ever sat down and read what your employer has to know, you'd scratch your head and go, how easy would it be to make a mistake? And we've seen that recently with cosmetics giant Lush, which has fallen foul of some of these laws. Now, of course, you do have certain places use it. There's specialised payroll services and stuff like that that say, hey, we're going to manage your payroll. But it's all well and good until it goes pear-shaped. Now, here's something that a lot of companies have said, and look, I have to say I have from the outset. I think this is an absolutely shocking business practice. However, sending services offshore suddenly makes it a lot easier for a lot of people. The reason being, they pay one flat fee and they get a service. Simple. Don't have to worry about compliances, don't have to file all those tax returns, don't have to send in the income tax. And by the way, if your employer doesn't pay your income tax, you might have trouble with the tax office, and we found that out in our conversation with Nick Bruning last night. We're joined on the program by Chris Green, who's the General Manager and Co-founder of Food Strategy and Restaurant Bookkeepers Australia, and also an entrepreneur. The reason why she's an entrepreneur was she was brave enough to say, I think I can actually make sense of some of these regulations and help people comply and be in compliance with the law. And a whole bunch of people probably turned around and said, Chris, you are my saviour. Thank you. Hello, Chris.
How are you, Chris?
Very well. Are you a bit of a masochist doing this kind of work? I sat down at some point and decided to have a look at some of the awards and some of the compliance regulations. And you start to realise that some small business people, when they say, mate, I'm spending most of my time trying to comply with rules and regulations and keep up to date, you understand exactly what they mean.
Yeah, they're pretty complex. Just in the restaurant industry alone, if you have to go through the questionnaire on Fair Work and it says, are you a barista? Do you work in a cafe or do you work in a restaurant? So you might fall under the fast food industry takeaway award, or you might fall under the restaurant industry award. Now, having two awards for one barista seems kind of confusing for an employer. Now, most people, when they start their restaurants or cafes, they do it for the love of food and they're passionate about food. They're not actually coming from a business background. So they hit the ground running in their new restaurant or cafe, and they have to then employ staff really quickly. But they also have to learn all the compliance and the rules and regulations and obligations that come with owning a business and also having staff underneath them. And I don't know about you, but if you've got an employee standing in front of you and that person's a barista and you've got to define yourself as to whether that person is working in a restaurant or cafe and what actually defines the difference, it's really, really complex, and there's pages and pages of information on Fair Work to decide that. And they do have a decision test where you can go through and tick some boxes and it will tell you what award it relates to. But I'm seeing lots of people out in the industry that really are paying people under the wrong award, and not because they want to or they're trying to rip people off. They clearly don't know. And then when the employee finds out that it's the wrong award, well, then that's when, what hits the fan, and it can go public. And as you said, there are dodgy operators, and some industries are more rife for that than others.
Oh, look, there is
They
no
have a
question that there are dodgy operators out there, but the problem is, using your example of a barista, now, with no disrespect to baristas, surely a barista is a barista, and they should be compensated equally for the service they provide, whether they provide that service in a restaurant or whether they provide that service in a cafe. How do we somehow decide that a person doing exactly the same job and producing exactly the same product is somehow different depending on the set of doors they walk through?
Look, there's a number of criteria. I won't go into too much detail because I don't want to get blamed for marking the wrong criteria. But you need to download the information from the fairwork.gov.au website. And you can also, like I said, click on the decision tools that will take you through that path, and then print off that information which shows you how you got to that decision about that particular employee, and put that in their employee file. So you've got something to go back on if ever there's an issue. It doesn't mean that you can select the wrong thing and describe somebody the wrong way and then put them in a different job. You still have to comply with what the rules are. It's like some of the people give chefs a salary and say, we will pay you a $500 a week salary, but they're making them work 60-hour weeks. You can't waive what is the person's basic right. So the argument that's being had out there in the food industry in particular, with some of the high-profile food celebrities that we know are getting into trouble, they actually have payroll departments that look after this stuff. So while that person is responsible for their company making bad decisions, I'd have to say, well, who is looking after their payroll department? Because clearly whoever the boss of the company is, they're not doing payroll, they're not serving the coffees, they're not working in all the restaurants. They have people underneath them. So somebody's got to get in trouble for that. But if it was all made a lot simpler and a lot more transparent, with how the awards are broken down, for so many minutes here you get a tea break, and then after so many minutes you then get entitled to this. It's really tough. So is the tradies, shop fitters, cabinet makers, builders. Their awards are just crazy.
How do we go about simplifying it? Because one of the questions we're asking, and one of the reasons why we can see, look, I think the practice that a lot of people, telephone companies and others, sending call centre services offshore, I think that's an abhorrent business practice for a number of reasons. You run into linguistic and cultural issues with people. When you, for example, try and talk to Telstra about some of the problems you're talking to somebody in the Philippines, you're probably talking to somebody and they don't have any idea or any concept of how somebody's internet in Morley is going to be working. They really haven't got a clue. And so that causes problems in and of itself. But at the same time, you realise that there's a company over there that they're writing a cheque to probably every month, and they're paying for the services, and therein ends the issue for them. Look, the public relations issues and the problems they're causing to other parts of the business aside, you can see that when it comes to a payroll issue, it makes it really simple. They're also not having to worry about covering the annual leave for those people, or providing their compulsory superannuation contributions, or covering their sick leave, and a whole raft of other things besides. So you can see why, from a straight-out business point of view, it's really easy. Cut a cheque once a month and the people provide the service. But something tells me that all of this does not have to be so complicated. There is a way that, firstly, we can keep jobs here and also make it so people, especially our friends in small business, can actually get back to running a business and not spend half their day just trying to comply with a whole bunch of nonsensical rules.
Well, apart from the awards, there's the new stuff that's coming in, which is called single touch payroll. Now, that is the software of businesses is connected, and this is not new, but the software is connected directly to the ATO, so you can lodge your BAS and those sort of returns. But what's come in for businesses with over 20 employees as of the 1st of July is single touch payroll. So every time you run a payroll on Xero or MyOb or QuickBooks, whatever software program you use, it lodges that PAYG and superannuation information every week or fortnight directly to the ATO. So you don't actually have to report that on your BAS every quarter. It's automatically done. And it's immediate. So people who are companies that are getting behind in paying their employees super, the ATO is on it as soon as the payroll is run. So for any business that has under 20 employees, as of the 1st of July next year, it's compulsory for them as well. So the whole country will be on it. That's really going to clean up the payroll situation. That doesn't address how complex the awards are and understanding whether you're paying people right, but it's certainly going to cut down some of the monitoring processes and things that you have to put behind it. It's really quite a simple process from the business owner's point of view, but it makes a greater transparency. So anybody who's hiding paying an employee's PAYG or hiding paying their super, that's going to be a lot tougher now. So there's a great benefit to the employee in that instance. So that's one step in the right direction, I feel.
Yeah, there's no doubt that's a step in the right direction. Actually, it's funny you mentioned something, because a lot of people talk about the fact that they find out later that employers, despite the fact it's compulsory to do so, have not been making their compulsory superannuation contributions. And for a lot of people, that becomes a real issue because, of course, later, if they subsequently find it, it can be really difficult to go back and try and recover that money.
Yeah, and Fair Work and the ATO are really clamping down on that now. I think they're starting to send a very clear message to business owners that it's just not allowed anymore. It's not like a free loan from your employees. You do have to pay that money every quarter. And the first thing that I tell our clients is when they're setting up, you get your trading check account that you pay your bills from and that people pay you into, or your POS system pays into, but you must have that second bank account, and every week you sweep a certain amount of money to that second bank account. So when your quarterly BAS is due, you have the cash there to pay it, and you will sleep so much better at night. But there's also people who don't understand that as they're making their sales at the cash register every week, that a percentage of that is not their money. It's not theirs to keep. So that's what GST is. It's not yours to keep. It must go in a separate bank account, and you must pay it at the end of that quarter, because that bill racks up really, really quickly. Before you know it, you've got a $50,000 debt to the ATO and you're on a payment plan. Then if you go to get a bank loan, you can't, because the first thing the banks look at now is, do you have a integrated client account with a loan at the ATO? And they're not loaning businesses money if they have debts with the ATO. So we kind of got out of control there, got a little bit deep, but it goes on and on. So, yeah, from wages through to non-compliance in many different areas of business, it gets a bit tricky. So the trick is just get it right from the start.
Yeah, that seems to be the logical message, really, doesn't it? But the thing is, though, and we get back to the original question, are a lot of our compliance issues unduly difficult, unduly complex, and can we simplify them? And can we do it in such a way that we don't disadvantage either employer or employee? Because right now, there's a whole bunch of people who are just simply trying to scrape together a living, who are spending vast amount of time simply worrying about whether or not they're complying. And this particular scenario that came out with Lush Cosmetics, now they're a bigger company. If that happened to one of our friends in small business, they could be in a lot of trouble.
When I see the ATO working with businesses in these situations, I actually see them, while they're cracking down, I also see them as quite, not lenient, but encouraging the business to get back on track. I don't think they're in the business of closing businesses down. They're trying to keep businesses open. So they are showing some leniency. They are saying, okay, well, what's in a payment plan that you can afford to get back on track? But when it comes to employees that haven't been paid correctly in the first place, those employees are angry and they want their money fast. So I don't think there's room to be lenient.
And we do get back to the old cliche there, don't we, that ignorance is no excuse.
Ignorance is no excuse. Once you own a company and you're registered with ASIC and you're on the record, you have no way of hiding from not knowing. I guess, once you register as a business, you're classed as a business owner.
Yep, exactly right.
You get all the rules that go with it.
Indeed, and some of them are quite complex, no doubt about that. Chris, we run out of time, but thank you very much for the chat. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I hope there was something in it for you.
Well, let's hope so. Chris Green, by the way, is the General Manager and Co-Founder of Food Strategy and Restaurant Bookkeepers Australia, and also an entrepreneur. And you know something, I kind of imagine there are so many people that dread that one simple but fairly straightforward word that has so many implications. The word of which I speak is compliant.